What is the shadow? And why you're already living with it? Have you ever reacted with sudden anger? A small comment, a tiny criticism, and you explode? Or have you caught yourself feeling envy towards someone you genuinely admire? Or felt a desire you consider wrong to admit, even to yourself? So, you're not alone. And more, you're not a bad person. In fact, what happened in those moments was something much deeper than a behavioral mistake. It was an encounter with a part of you you don't usually see. Part you might not even know exists. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, called this the shadow. Not in the sense of evil, but as the repressed, denied, hidden part of us, buried beneath consciousness. The shadow isn't your bad side. It's the unrecognized side. The side that society, family, education, religion, or even you said, this isn't acceptable. This can't come out. And so it was pushed down into the basement of the mind. And there it remains alive, sometimes silent, sometimes screaming, but always present. And here's the twist. The more you try to ignore the shadow, the more it shows up. Not directly because you don't recognize it, but through projection, exaggerated reactions, self-sabotage, or emotional pain. So if you've ever asked, why do I do this to myself? Why do I feel this way if I don't want to be like this? Why do I attract exactly what I hate most? There's a chance the answer lies in the shadow. And here's the most powerful truth. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your deepest ally, if you have the courage to look at it. What is the shadow? Jung's definition. For Jung, the human psyche isn't just what you think, feel, or consciously decide. It's much broader. It has layers, and most of it is outside your direct control. Jung saw the mind as an iceberg. Above water, consciousness, your thoughts, choices, identity. Below, the unconscious, vast and deep. Inside this unconscious, he placed the shadow not as a monster but as an archetype, a universal pattern of the human mind. The shadow is made of everything you've rejected in yourself over your life. Things judged as too aggressive, too sensitive, too selfish, too weak, too desiring, too lazy, too rebellious, and also what you admired in others but didn't allow yourself to be. For example, you saw your brother praised for being outgoing while you were quiet, or your mother was careful, and you, spontaneous, were called disorganized, or you felt anger, but were taught that love doesn't fight. Slowly, you learned, these parts of me aren't good. I need to hide them. And so they went into the shadow. But here's the truth. The shadow isn't just what's bad. It also holds what was repressed for being too good, but you didn't feel worthy of expressing. For example, a desire to shine, but fear of seeming arrogant. Extreme sensitivity, but fear of being seen as weak. A creative talent, but guilt for not being useful. The shadow, then, is everything not integrated into your conscious identity. And the most fascinating part? It has a life of its own. It influences your choices, relationships, emotions without you noticing. Real examples, how the shadow shows up. Let's look at real examples because the shadow isn't theory. It lives in daily life. Example 1. The well-mannered person who explodes at the waiter. Imagine someone who sees themselves as polite, respectful, always in control. But one day, on a busy day, a waiter messes up their order, and they completely lose it. They turn red, yell, humiliate. Afterward, they feel terrible. I'm not like this. What came over me? Here, the shadow is at work. For years, this person repressed their anger, their right to stand up, their dissatisfaction. All of it went into the shadow. But energy doesn't disappear, and in a moment of stress, it erupts. Not as justified anger, but as disproportionate explosion. Example 2. Envy disguised as criticism. Do you know someone who constantly criticizes ambitious people? Oh, he just wants attention. No character. But deep down, they have a huge desire for success. Only they were taught that wanting the top makes you selfish. So they repressed that desire. And now, every time they see someone living what they want, they project their shadow. I don't like him because he's like that. But really it's, I don't like this part of me, so I hate who lives it. Example 3. The caregiver who resents. Someone who always takes care of others, sacrifices, says no problem, even when it is, but deep down, feels silent resentment, deep exhaustion, and sometimes a desire to say, enough, I want to think of myself. But guilt comes immediately, because in the shadow lies the desire for self-care, judged as selfish. So they keep giving until they break. These aren't character flaws. They're encounters with the shadow. And the most common thing, we don't recognize them, because the shadow doesn't come with a warning. Hello, I'm your shadow. I'm here. Comes disguised as anger, criticism, fatigue, self-sabotage. Questions for you, start seeing your shadow. Now, I want to ask you some questions. Not to judge you, but to help you start seeing what's beneath. Write them down or just reflect. When was the last time you had a disproportionate reaction? Something small caused a huge emotion. Anger, sadness, shame. What was really at stake? What were you protecting? Who do you criticize most in others? The arrogant? The lazy? The manipulative? Could it be that you fear being like that? Or that you wish you could be like that but don't allow it? Which compliments are hard for you to accept? You're strong. You're sensual. You're powerful. Why might a compliment make you uncomfortable? Maybe it touches a part of you you don't recognize as yours? What do you judge most harshly in others? And what do you forgive in yourself? The shadow often lives in the imbalance between judgment and self-forgiveness. What dreams, desires, or fantasies do you think are too wrong to admit, even to yourself? Where do you cut your own emotional freedom? The shadow doesn't reveal itself in grand gestures. It shows up in small discomforts, in reactions you don't understand, in people who irritate you for no reason, in parts of you you find unacceptable. The shadow isn't meant to be eliminated. It's meant to be met, because as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In the next minutes, we'll dive deep into how the shadow forms throughout life. We'll talk about childhood, parents, society, and how every no you heard built a wall between you and essential parts of yourself. Because understanding the origin of the shadow is the first step to integrating it. Not to become someone different, but to become more whole. Until then, breathe and ask yourself, what am I hiding from myself? How the shadow forms from childhood to adulthood. You weren't born with the shadow. You built it piece by piece over the years, especially in childhood. Childhood is the fertile ground where the shadow begins to grow, not out of malice, but out of necessity, because for a child, emotional survival depends on the love of adults. And from an early age, you learned, if I am like this, they will love me. If I am like this, they will reject me. And since you had no choice, you adapted. You began to hide what wasn't welcome, and to show what was rewarded. That's how the persona, the social mask, was born. And that's how the shadow began to form. Imagine a child who cries easily. Parents say, boys don't cry. Stop being weak. That's just being dramatic. What does the child do? Not rebellion. Adaptation. They understand. My sensitivity isn't welcome. I need to hide it. And so they begin to repress. Not just tears, but fear, pain, vulnerability. Everything judged as weak goes into the shadow. Or think of a creative child, lost in imagination. But at school, only productivity, organization, and focus are valued. They hear, stop daydreaming. That won't get you anywhere. What do? They hide their creativity, start to believe it's a waste of time. And that magical, free, bold part goes into the shadow. Or a child who feels anger. But at home, anger is forbidden. Love doesn't fight. You'll lose your friends. So they learn, my anger is dangerous. I need to suffocate it. But anger doesn't disappear. Turns into resentment, passivity, self-criticism. Or explodes years later at work, in a relationship, at a stranger in traffic. Every no you heard in childhood was a brick in the wall separating you from essential parts of yourself. And every yes, every praise, every affection was an incentive to keep the mask in place. The persona, the mask you wear to be accepted. The persona is what you show the world. Your Instagram profile, your posture at work, how you speak to your parents, how you dress, behave, present yourself. It's necessary. Without a persona, living in society would be impossible. You need a social self. But the problem starts when you confuse the persona with who you are. Jung said, "Whoever confuses the persona with identity loses the soul." And this happens all the time. You spend years building an image of success, calm, competence, kindness, and begin to believe that's all you are. But inside, you feel emptiness, exhaustion, a sense that you're pretending. Because while the persona shines outside, the shadow grows within. And the more perfect the persona, the darker and denser the shadow. Think of someone who's always the good one, the responsible one, the helper, but deep inside feels anger, desire to rest, need to say no. These parts go into the shadow, and one day they demand payment. Or someone who's the strong one, the unshakable one, the one who holds the family, but in silence feels fear, insecurity, need for comfort. These parts are banned because they don't fit the persona. The persona then becomes a prison. You live to maintain the image and die a little each day because you can't be who you are. Society and culture, the collective shadow. The shadow isn't just individual, it's also collective. Jung spoke of the collective shadow, the aspects an entire society rejects, but that remain alive in prejudices, fears, judgments. For example, our culture rejects sadness. Don't cry, be strong. So sadness goes into the shadow, individually and collectively, and turns into depression, anxiety, emptiness. Our culture rejects the body, especially desire, sensuality, pleasure without purpose. So these parts go into the shadow and turn into shame, guilt, self-rejection. Our culture rejects laziness. You need to produce. Rest is wasted time. So rest goes into the shadow and turns into burnout, exhaustion, self-sabotage. And what happens? These repressed parts don't disappear. They manifest in mass, in violence against those who are weak, in judgment against those who are free, in rejection of those who don't produce, because the collective shadow needs a scapegoat. It projects onto someone what the whole society denies in itself. And of course, this happens to you too. You may have repressed your anger, but hate it in others. Repressed your desire to rest, but judge those who do nothing. Repressed your sensitivity, but think it's too much when someone cries. Questions for you: where did your shadow come from? Now, I want you to look back, not to blame anyone, but to understand. Questions to reflect on: what were the emotional rules in your home? What was allowed to feel? What was punished? Anger? Sadness? Desire? Excessive joy? Which traits in you were praised? Which were criticized? Were you the smart one? The good girl? The calm one? And what did you have to hide to keep that? Who did you have to stop being to be loved? This is the strongest question, because often the price of love was self-denial. What do you feel ashamed to admit about yourself? Not because it's wrong, but because you fear not being accepted. Which parts of you still feel forbidden today? Do you still feel you need to hide them to be valid? The shadow isn't a flaw. It's a record, a silent diary of everything you had to hide to survive. Now you understand. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's a survivor. It's a part of you exiled for making sense in the past. But the past doesn't need to rule the present. In the next minutes, we'll talk about how the shadow manifests today. In your reactions, relationships, patterns. We'll learn to recognize the signs and understand why you often attract exactly what you fear most. Because the first step to integrating the shadow isn't to judge it, it's to identify it. Until then, remember, You're not what you hide. You're what you're ready to see. How the shadow shows up today: projections, relationships, and self-sabotage. Now that you understand how the shadow formed, let's go to the most revealing part: how it acts in your daily life without you realizing it. Because the shadow isn't stuck in the past. It's alive. And like a survival system, it tries to manifest. But since you don't recognize it, it appears indirectly. The main way? Projection. Jung said, everything you see in others is a shadow projected from what you don't see in yourself. Projection is when you see in someone else a quality, positive or negative, that actually belongs to you but is in the shadow. For example, you know someone who's very confident, direct, even a bit arrogant, and you hate it. What an unbearable person. Only thinks of himself. But deep down, you have a huge desire to be like that, to speak your mind, to stand up for yourself, to not care what others think. But it was repressed. So instead of recognizing, I wish I had that courage, you project, he's selfish. Or you're attracted to someone who's chaotic, free, unpredictable. But at the same time, you're afraid. I can't get involved with someone like that. They'll destroy me. Why this mix of attraction and fear? Because this person lives a part of you in the shadow. The spontaneous side, the unplanned side, the risky side. You love it because it's yours, and you fear it because it was banned. Relationships. Why you attract what you fear most. Now, let's talk about relationships, because that's where the shadow reveals itself most. Have you ever asked, why do I always get involved with people who hurt me? Why do I attract those who abandon me, control me, devalue me? Seems like bad luck. But often it's the shadow in action. You don't attract random people. You attract mirrors. People who carry the same wounds as you, or who live exactly what you repressed. For example, you were raised with emotional abandonment, and deep down you fear being left. But instead of healing it, you attract people who disappear. Why? Because the unconscious says, if I suffer this again, maybe I can finally fix it. It's a repetition cycle, not masochism, but unconscious hope. You repressed your anger, so you attract someone who's aggressive, controlling, explosive. They live the anger you don't, and you, in the victim role, feel clean, kind, patient. But deep down, you're dealing with your own shadow. You repressed your sensuality, so you get involved with someone extremely seductive, but emotionally cold. They live the desire you deny, and you, by suffering for them, feel not superficial. It's sad, but it's intelligent. The psyche is trying to show you something. And the most common thing, you think the problem is the other, but the other is just the trigger. The real issue is the part of you that wasn't seen. Self-sabotage, when the shadow sabotages your success. Another powerful way the shadow shows up is self-sabotage. You start a project. It's going well. You're progressing. And suddenly, you quit, or start procrastinating, or create a conflict, or just disappear. It seems like lack of discipline, but often it's the shadow acting. Because when you approach something that challenges your persona, the shadow goes into alert mode. Thinks, if he changes, if he shines, if he's real, what will happen to the mask? And to the love I get for being who I've always been? It doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to protect you, but it protects the wrong way. For example, you're about to be promoted, but days before, you lose your temper in a meeting. Why? Maybe because deep down you don't feel worthy, and the shadow says, better fail now than be exposed later. You start taking care of yourself, losing weight, feeling good. But then you go back to overeating, stop exercising. Why? Maybe because the new you scares your old identity. And the shadow says, go back to safety. You fall in love. But the closer you get, the more conflicts you create. Why? Because deep intimacy brings fear of abandonment, and the shadow prefers to reject first rather than be rejected. Self-sabotage isn't weakness. It's an unconscious act of protection. And when you understand this, you stop judging yourself and start healing. Questions for you: recognizing the signs of the shadow. Now, I want you to look at your life with new eyes. Questions to reflect on. Who do you criticize the most? The arrogant? The passive? The manipulative? Could you fear being like that? Or wish you could be like that, but don't allow it? Which repetitive relationship patterns do you have? Always with those who disappear, who control, who need you. What old wound is being relived? When was the last time you self-sabotaged something important? A job, a love, a dream? What did you feel before? Fear? Guilt? Shame? What do you find excessive in others? Emotion? Desire? Success? Freedom? Could it just be excess? Or what you repressed? What do you judge most harshly in others and forgive in yourself? The shadow lives in the imbalance between judgment and self-forgiveness. The shadow doesn't hide. It manifests, but you need to know where to look. Transition to next part. Now you can recognize the signs. You see how the shadow shows up in your reactions, relationships, patterns. But recognizing isn't the end. It's the beginning. In the next minutes, we'll talk about how to integrate the shadow. Not to become someone different, but to become more whole, more authentic, freer. We'll see practical exercises, how to talk to your shadow, and why embracing your shadows is the path to true light. Until then, remember, you don't need to get rid of the shadow. You need to reconcile with it. So far, we've talked about what the shadow is, how it formed, how it manifests. But now we reach the most important point, what to do with it. Most people think, I need to eliminate the shadow, get rid of it. But for Jung, that would be a grave mistake. Because the shadow isn't trash to be discarded. It's a living part of you, a dormant ally. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, it's to integrate it. Integration doesn't mean becoming aggressive, lazy, or chaotic. It means acknowledging these parts exist in you and that they have a role, value, message. When you integrate the shadow, you don't lose control. You gain authenticity. You stop being a character and start being a complete human being. Because no one is only light. No one is only kindness, calm, productivity. That's persona. That's mask. To be human is to have anger, desire, fear, impulse, chaos, passion, and choose consciously how to live it. Integrating the shadow is the path to that. Practical exercise. Write a letter to your shadow. Let me guide you through a simple but powerful exercise. You can do it now, mentally, or later with pen and paper. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe deeply. Imagine there's a part of you that was rejected, hidden, judged, blamed, ignored. Does it have a face, a voice, an age? It might be a child. It might be a rebellious youth. It might be someone dark or someone free. Now imagine it sitting across from you. Not as an enemy, but as someone who suffered for you, who sacrificed so you could be accepted. Now write a letter to it, or say mentally, I see you. I know you're there. I know you were the one who held the anger I couldn't feel. You were the one who lived the desire I couldn't admit. You were the one who cried when I had to smile. You weren't the problem. You were the solution back then. But now I'm here, and I can embrace you. I don't need to hide you anymore. You can exist with me. This letter doesn't need to be perfect. Can be simple. Can have tears. The important thing is the gesture. To recognize. To validate. To invite back. How to talk to the shadow. Inner dialogue. The shadow doesn't respond to judgment. It responds to compassionate attention. You don't master the shadow with willpower. You calm it with listening. So when you feel an impulse that feels wrong, anger, desire, laziness, envy, don't react with guilt. Pause and ask, what are you trying to tell me? For example, you feel anger at someone who ignores you. Instead of, I can't be angry, ask, what is this anger protecting? Maybe, my right to be seen. You feel the desire to quit your job. Instead of, I'm lazy, ask, what is this fatigue trying to show me? Maybe, I need rest. I need meaning. You feel envy towards someone who shines. Instead of judging, I'm bad for feeling this. Ask, What am I denying in myself? Maybe, I want to shine too, and I'm afraid. This dialogue changes everything, because when you ask, you stop fighting yourself, and you start listening. And when you listen, the shadow stops being a monster. It becomes a messenger. Dreams and images. The shadow's language. The shadow speaks, but not in words. It speaks through symbols. And the place where it reveals itself most? In dreams. Jung said dreams are the voice of the unconscious. And often the shadow appears as a stranger, pursuer, an animal, a dark figure, someone you know, but with a different look. For example, you dream you're being chased by someone in a hood. You run but can't escape. When you finally turn to face them, it's you. That's a classic shadow dream. The pursuer is the part of you you're running from. And the dream says, you won't escape. You need to face yourself. Another example, you dream of an aggressive dog. But when you wake up, you feel it wasn't just anger, it was loyalty, protection. Maybe the shadow is showing that your aggression has a purpose, to protect those you love. You don't need to analyze every dream. But when a dream repeats or marks you, ask, who is this figure? Could it be a part of me I don't recognize? Transition to next part. Now you know, the shadow isn't to be destroyed. It's to be invited back into the light. In the next 10 minutes, we'll talk about the real benefits of integrating the shadow. More energy, more creativity, more authentic relationships, end of self-sabotage, and most importantly, how to live with more courage without needing to be perfect. Because as Jung said, you don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Until then, remember, peace isn't in eliminating your shadows, it's in walking with them. The benefits of integrating the shadow, energy, creativity, and authenticity. The energy that returns, end of emotional fatigue. You felt that fatigue that won't go away? That tiredness not of the body, but of the soul? You sleep, rest, but wake up as if you carried a weight all night? That fatigue often has a name, effort of repression, because keeping the shadow hidden takes constant energy. You spend emotional and mental strength to deny what you feel, control what you think, maintain the mask, judge parts of yourself. It's like holding a heavy lid over a boiling pot, day after day, year after year. And when you finally decide, enough, I'll look at what's there, the lid opens, and the energy you used to repress returns to you. That's why, after integrating the shadow, many say, I've never felt so light. I have more energy than before. It's like I recovered something I lost. It's not magic. It's psychic physics. When you stop fighting yourself, you free immense energy. And that energy doesn't go to waste. It goes to life, to love, to work, to creativity, the shadow and creativity, the dark side of inspiration. Now, let's talk about something unexpected. The shadow is the source of true creativity. Jung said, creativity begins where personality ends. That is, you don't create something new with your persona. You create with what's beyond it, with what's unstable, chaotic, unconscious. The benefits of integrating the shadow, energy, creativity, and authenticity. The energy that returns, end of emotional fatigue. You felt that fatigue that won't go away? That tiredness not of the body, but of the soul? You sleep, rest, but wake up as if you carried a weight all night? That fatigue often has a name, effort of repression, because keeping the shadow hidden takes constant energy. You spend emotional and mental strength to deny what you feel, control what you think, maintain the mask, judge parts of yourself. It's like holding a heavy lid over a boiling pot, day after day, year after year. And when you finally decide, enough, I'll look at what's there, the lid opens, and the energy you used to repress returns to you. That's why, after integrating the shadow, many say, I've never felt so light. I have more energy than before. It's like I recovered something I lost. It's not magic. It's psychic physics. When you stop fighting yourself, you free immense energy, and that energy doesn't go to waste. It goes to life, to love, to work, to creativity, the shadow and creativity, the dark side of inspiration. Now, let's talk about something unexpected. The shadow is the source of true creativity. Jung said, "Creativity begins where personality ends." That is, you don't create something new with your persona. You create with what's beyond it, with what's unstable, chaotic, unconscious. Think of great artists, Van Gogh with his pain and intensity, Frida Kahlo with her dreams and suffering, Nina Simone with her rage and passion, David Bowie with his multiple identities. They didn't flee the shadow, they used it. The shadow has impulse, passion, chaos, desire, instinct, all that the persona considers dangerous, but when integrated becomes raw material for art. You don't need to be an artist to be creative. Creativity is solving a problem in a new way, having a fresh idea at work, changing a relationship, rebuilding yourself, and it all comes when you stop repressing and allow what's hidden to move. That's why many only start creating after a breakdown, a crisis, grief, because in those moments the persona cracks and the shadow steps in, not to destroy, to be reborn. Authentic relationships, end of projections. Another deep benefit of shadow integration, more authentic relationships, because as long as you project your shadow onto others, you don't see people as they are. You see in them what you deny in yourself. But when you start recognizing, this anger I hate in the other is mine. This desire I judge is mine. This weakness that irritates me is mine too. Something changes. You stop being a judge. You become a human being. And when you stop projecting, you start seeing. You see the other more clearly. You listen with presence. You love without fear. And the most beautiful thing, you attract different relationships. Because when you stop unconscious patterns, the field changes. You no longer attract those who hurt you. You attract those who complement, not complete you. And most rare, you can love without losing yourself. Because you're no longer seeking in the other what you denied in yourself. Authenticity, living without a mask. And we arrive at the greatest benefit of all. Authenticity, the real one, not the one from motivational quotes, but the one that hurts, the one that takes courage. Integrating the shadow isn't about being good or bad. It's about being real. Saying, I have anger, and still I can love. I have fear, and still I can move forward. I want to rest, and still I can be productive. I am sensitive, and still I am strong. It's living with paradoxes, because being human isn't about consistency. It's about complexity. And when you integrate the shadow, you stop dividing yourself. You're no longer the good and the bad. You are whole. And in that wholeness, there is peace. Because you're no longer at war. You're in dialogue. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to please. You just need to exist. And in that existence, there is freedom. You don't become enlightened by eliminating darkness. You become whole by walking with it. In the next minutes, we'll close this journey with a powerful ending. How to live with the shadow every day. A final integration exercise. And a message of hope for those still afraid to look. Because in the end, the shadow journey isn't about psychology. It's about courage. The courage to meet yourself. Until then, remember, you don't need all the answers. You just need to be willing to look. How to live with the shadow, an invitation to courage. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the ally. We've reached the end. But in truth, we're at the beginning. Because this journey, the journey of the shadow, doesn't end here. It begins. And I want you to understand, with all care in the world, the shadow is not your enemy. It's not against you. It's for you. It's the part of you exiled so you could survive. That held the anger you couldn't feel, the fear you couldn't show, the desire you couldn't admit. It's the guardian of what was repressed. the protector of what was judged, the witness of what was silenced. And now it doesn't want to destroy. It wants to be seen, to be heard, to be welcomed. You don't need to defeat the shadow. You need to reconcile with it. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Integrating the shadow isn't an occasional act of courage. It's a daily commitment, a constant invitation to look at what hurts, what scares, what you think you shouldn't be, but it is, and it's necessary. Final exercise, embracing the shadow. Let me guide you through a simple but deep exercise. You can do it now, mentally, or later in silence. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply, 3 times. Release your body. Now, bring to mind the part of you you reject most. The one you call weak, selfish, wrong, dangerous. It might be anger, desire, laziness, sadness, fear, rebellion. Imagine it in front of you, not as a threat, but as someone who suffered for you, who carried the weight so you could be accepted. Look into their eyes and say silently, from the heart, I see you. I know you're there. I know you were the one who held what I couldn't feel. I know you were the one who lived what I couldn't show. You weren't the problem. You were the solution back then. But now I'm here, and I can embrace you. You don't need to hide anymore. You can exist with me. You are part of me, and I accept you. Feel it, even if no words come, even if tears come, even if silence comes. This embrace isn't an end. It's a beginning. The beginning of a new relationship with yourself. A new beginning. Living with the shadow every day. Integrating the shadow isn't an event. It's a path. You don't look once and done. You look every day. Because life changes. You change. And the shadow changes too. So how to live with it? With attention. When you feel a strong reaction, pause. Ask, what is this trying to tell me? With compassion. Don't judge what arises. Welcome it. Say, it's you again. Thank you for being here. With courage. Sometimes it will be uncomfortable, but discomfort isn't a sign of error. It's a sign of growth. With patience. You took years to build the shadow. It will take time to integrate it. And that's okay. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be true. I see you. I know you're there. I know you were the one who held what I couldn't feel. I know you were the one who lived what I couldn't show. You weren't the problem. You were the solution back then. But now I'm here, and I can embrace you. You don't need to hide anymore. You can exist with me. You are part of me, and I accept you. Feel it, even if no words come, even if tears come, even if silence comes. This embrace isn't an end. It's a beginning. The beginning of a new relationship with yourself. A new beginning. Living with the shadow every day. Integrating the shadow isn't an event. It's a path. You don't look once and done. You look every day. Because life changes. You change. And the shadow changes too. So how to live with it? With attention. When you feel a strong reaction, pause. Ask, what is this trying to tell me? With compassion. Don't judge what arises. Welcome it. Say, it's you again. Thank you for being here. With courage. Sometimes it will be uncomfortable, but discomfort isn't a sign of error. It's a sign of growth. With patience. You took years to build the shadow. It will take time to integrate it. And that's okay. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be true. Your journey starts now. If this resonated with you, save this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because many are living in the dark. Without knowing the darkness can be light. And if you identified with any part, comment, I see you. Not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a promise. I will look. I will listen. I will meet myself. And finally, follow for more on self-awareness, healing, and real courage. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a deeper journey. Until our next meeting. And in the meantime, may you have the courage to look within. Because as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But when you look, You regain control. You regain your soul. And you're no longer lost. You're home. Peace isn't in eliminating your shadows. It's in walking with them. Inspired by Carl Jung, Black Heart End.